so we can put it on our website later. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. And thanks for the opportunity to join each of you this morning. Nice to see all of these smiling faces at 10 o'clock in the morning when you could be doing other things. So I hope that we're able to have a good conversation. I'll have a short presentation, but I'm hoping maybe it's because I'm a social worker. I prefer the interaction. I didn't do well when I tried my hand at being a professor. I found that not as flexible as I would have wanted it to be. So I definitely prefer the back and forth. Thank you, Stephanie, for that wonderful, very generous introduction. Just one note, Housing Up is a fantastic organization, a nonprofit I had the privilege of working for in DC. I wish I'd been there for 17 years. I was there for almost 4. And had a chance to experience some wonderful work. But the balance of my work was either, well, I like to say that I am now, as a nonprofit leader, I'm on the other side. The balance of my work had been in the government role with child and public welfare. And now I've learned many, many lessons about how it must have felt for our nonprofit partners to be on the other side. So I'm very sensitive to that and very happy to be practicing in this role. So Stephanie and Emily both have said, and it's correct, that Potomac Presbyterian has a long and wonderful history with Interfaith Works. I am still reasonably new, although my folks keep telling me I can't say that anymore because it's been a little over 6 months now. But I have certainly heard much about the wonderful history and friendship partnership that we've had with Potomac Presbyterian. I did learn just this morning that apparently one of our marquee programs, which is no longer in as great operation as we would have wanted to, that apparently Potomac Presbyterian liked it so much, you decided to create your own spinoff for Project Shine, is what I learned this morning. And I think several of you who are on the call this morning have some familiarity with that program. So I'm hoping that at the end of today's conversation, you would have not only learned a bit more about Interfaith Works and the work that we do, you would have had a chance to understand how you may have an opportunity to be involved, perhaps things that you didn't know before. And I'm hoping that certainly as a result of this conversation, I may learn some things, given that many of you have been connected to Interfaith Works for far longer than I have been. So I do have a short history. I have a few client videos that I'd like to show as well, just as a way of sort of describing the work that we've done. So I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, I hope everyone can see that. So at Interfaith Works, we've been doing this work for almost 50 years. We will be 50 next year. I'm really, really proud of that. Some people have said that they've gotten haircuts during the pandemic. Some have found new skills. Others have had the opportunity to do other wonderful things. I had the opportunity to join an organization in the middle of a pandemic, which was not easy, but has been a very, very rewarding challenge so far. Our mission is that we work together with our communities to serve our neighbors in need. We have styled ourselves as an advocate for poverty in Montgomery County, and we're very proud of the work that we've been able to do to help those who are experiencing poverty, those who we have termed as our most vulnerable neighbors, so the people who actually needed the help the most. So as Stephanie said, Interfaith Works was founded in 1972 as a coalition of non-sectarian interfaith congregations who really got together and decided that it was necessary to do something to help serve those who are experiencing poverty in the county. Many of us think of Montgomery County as a very wealthy place, which is true, a very diverse place, which is also true. But also, it's also true that there are many who are experiencing poverty in Montgomery County. We'll get to that in a second. But as a result of the work that we do, we generally touch about 17,000 people a year. I will say that by the time fiscal year 21 is over, and our fiscal year runs through June 30th, I'm certain, because of some of the new programs that we've stood up in the middle of the pandemic, and because of the extreme need that we've seen, we will likely probably have touched 25, 30,000 people. And I'll get to some of that in just a little bit. So just a snapshot of homelessness in Montgomery County. In Montgomery County, I'm gonna, actually, if you give me just a second, I'm going to move this because I find myself looking at my second screen when I actually want to be looking at you all. So give me just a minute here. Okay, that's a little better. Now it won't look as if I am distracted. Okay, so in Montgomery County, there are 670 residents as of the last count who are experiencing homelessness. And we define homelessness as either those who are living on the streets, literally, or those who are what we call couch surfing, meaning that they're living in temporary housing. That includes 60 families and 113 children. And again, for a county this size, that may not sound like a lot, but we have to think about the impact of those people who are experiencing these significant conditions in the county. Beyond those who are literally homeless, so either living on the streets or couch surfing because they don't have a stable place of their own, there's a much larger percentage of people who are living in poverty. And poverty is defined by the federal poverty level, which essentially means that you are dependent on federal aid in order to, or state aid, in order to be able to meet your basic needs. So there's 72,000 residents in Montgomery County who are living in poverty. Beyond that, though, we also know that the federal poverty line, as described by the federal government, is actually a very, very low indicator of those who are actually struggling in Montgomery County, because we know that in Montgomery County, it takes about, a household must be earning about $86,000 in order to live without subsidy, which means that you are not receiving any sort of rental subsidy from the county or from the state. You're not receiving food assistance. You're not receiving cash payments to help with meeting your child's basic needs. So if we look at that number and we think about what that may translate to in number of people affected, I think the picture around poverty in Montgomery County becomes to be much clearer. So there are many, many people who have been living right on the edge of poverty. And as I've said in earlier conversations, the pandemic has brought into stark contrast or into stark focus that there are many, many people who are always living right on the edge of poverty. We would have never known it, but they've had to come and seek help. And I'm happy that we've been able to help in that way. So our approach at Interfaith Works is to help people where they are. We support people as they move out of poverty, and our goal is to help people move into financial stability. We do that by providing people, helping people get access to housing, clothing, household goods, job readiness, financial coaching if it's necessary. And ultimately, we help people to be able to meet the goals that they say they want to meet. And that's really an important distinction there, because most people who come through our doors, if you will, pick up the phone and call us, they have a very clear idea of where they want to be, but they may not have up to that point had the opportunity or the resources or the help to be able to get to where they want to be. And in many ways, that is our job, to help them get to that point. Our sort of core way that we describe our program is through our service model, which is preventing homelessness, stabilizing life, and empowering success. And through that, we describe all of the services really that we provide to the community. So many people know us for our homeless shelters, so we certainly do that. We operate 3 shelters in the county, the only 2 year-round women's shelters in the county. One of those, the Women's Center, is one of our marquee programs. The other, which is a shelter that we stood up during the pandemic as a result of the increased need and the need to space people further apart while they are sleeping. So we stood up a second shelter at the Cofield Recreation Center. So we are running 2 women's shelters right now, and we also have a third, which is a co-ed shelter, mostly for men, but also some women sleep there as well. We offer a referral. We provide emergency assistance. We do food distribution, which is a new program for us, and I'll talk about that a bit later. And also many people know us for our clothing center. We also provide supportive housing and permanent housing for many other residents who need an extra leg up, and in many cases, that extra leg up means longer term rental assistance. I just mentioned how much it costs to live in the county, how expensive it is, and how many families are living right on the edge. In my view, many of the things that we do really points to this last piece here, which is empowering success. And that is through our job coaching program. It's called Vocational Services. I'll mention a little bit more about that later, but I think it's really important to think through what it takes to help someone who may have been experiencing chronic unemployment, but who wants to work, and being able to work with them from the time that they enter our program until the time that they're placed in a job. And perhaps that will be a good place to start as we talk about our impact for last fiscal year. So last year, we housed 719 people through our emergency shelter and permanent supportive housing programs. We placed almost 150 people in jobs that had an hourly wage of $15.05 an hour. And I'm really proud of that, because this was before, actually right now, the minimum wage in the county will not increase to $15 an hour technically until July 1st. That's the beginning of the county's fiscal year. So we were able to place people in jobs that averaged above the minimum wage. And we estimate that because of the revenue that our clients have earned, they've earned collectively about $3 million of income. And that, again, I think says a lot about the kind of impact that our vocational services program has had in the county. And then 1,300 people we connected to essential services through our Connections program. And that is, I like to describe that as a 311 for human services. That included access to food, to healthcare, to job training. And then through our clothing center, just over 12,000 people received access to clothing and household goods. Okay. You might imagine that COVID-19 really changed quite a bit of what we have done and how we have helped people during this pandemic. So I've mentioned already that we stood up a new shelter, which we were not intending to do, but we did this in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We've also made our shelters year-round. So one of the shelters, the one that I mentioned, which is co-ed, that's over at Progress Place, we generally will operate that shelter seasonally. So it's generally during the cold season. So from November or so, October, November through March, when the weather is really, really cold, is when we'll have that open. This year, because of the pandemic and because we really we wanted as few people sleeping on the street as possible, we worked with the county to ensure that that shelter was open year round. So all three of our shelters now have been operating for many months, far beyond the time frame that they're usually operating. And it's a lot of work, but it's also very rewarding to know that there are people who are no longer sleeping on the streets because we're able to help in that way. I mentioned that we stood up a brand new program during the pandemic, actually in December, because of what we thought the additional response for COVID-19 needed to be. And that's our food distribution program. So just again, keep in mind that I said at the beginning that we generally serve about 17,000 people every year. That's historically what we've done. Just since December, through this food distribution program, we have already touched 8,000 households. And when you multiply that by the number of people in each household, you're really talking about approximately 17,000 people in about 4 months. We are serving about 500, almost 600 households every week. And frankly, it's a very jarring sight to see the number of people who are lined up. We are very efficient and we're very good at what we do. I'm very, very proud of our team. We're able to serve about 4 or 5 cars every minute. So they're very good at moving people through. But to see the number of people who are queued up waiting to receive some assistance because they are at that moment in their lives unable to purchase food for themselves. And this is something I've heard a lot from our volunteers when they come to serve through that program, the kinds of cars. I think we have historically, unfortunately, had a perception about who is in need and who is not. And when you see Teslas and BMWs and Mercedes and newer model cars coming through the food line, that has been an eye-opener for many, many people. And the way that we've explained it is that, this person was likely, who has this nicer car, was likely doing pretty well pre-pandemic and then lost their job and realized over time that they were unable to provide for their families. And in many, many cases, we find that people are very ashamed, I think would be an accurate term to use, that they have to be in a food line to be able to receive assistance. So we do our very best to make sure that we serve people in a very dignified way, that there's no shame, no stigma attached to the assistance that we're receiving. In fact, that is one of the programs where the only information we ask for from people is their zip code, their ethnicity, and the number of people in their household. And that just helps us with our tracking for tracking purposes. And we do that intentionally because we have realized that many people who are now accessing our services have not had to in the past. And we certainly want to make sure that the barriers to folks accessing the services are as low as possible. We've also been helping folks who have struggled with avoiding utility shutoffs and also avoiding eviction. There is an eviction moratorium in Montgomery County and in the state, but what we've realized is that many people are still being evicted. And so in order to help people prevent those evictions, we have a cash assistance program that is administered through our Connections program. And that is almost exclusively supported by people in the community who have realized that this is a need and have been extremely generous during the pandemic to help us to maintain a program like that. So we need you. We need your help. Certainly, we welcome and need your financial support. We really appreciate your time. We have many people who have come to donate their time by volunteering. And we appreciate the way that you speak up for people who are experiencing poverty, to help others who may be in your community or maybe in other communities who don't quite understand what it means to be right on the edge of poverty and to need assistance. I've mentioned a couple of times our clothing center, which you'll see in this video here, and also the food hub. Those are our two probably most popular, if you will, volunteer opportunities that people have an opportunity, where people have an opportunity to volunteer because the space is so large that it's easy to socially distance. It's easy to be able to come and do in-person volunteering, and you can immediately see the impact that you're having. Similarly, with our food hub, there are many people who find great pleasure in coming to help people get access to the food that they need that we're able to provide. So I'd encourage you to consider both of those as volunteer opportunities as well. We also have many people who enjoy dropping off meals for our shelters, particularly the women's shelters. We have many people, many congregation groups who find great pleasure in being able to prepare the meals. Although in the past we used to do the group who would bring the food would also have an opportunity to serve the food. Obviously, because of COVID, that is no longer an option, but many people still find great pleasure in being able to prepare and distribute the food. In fact, that new shelter that we stood up during the pandemic at the Cofield Recreation Center, there's a neighborhood not too far from there. And what has blown me away is the sheer generosity of the neighbors. Instead of reacting with NIMBYism and not wanting, those people to be in their backyard, we have seen people come to drop off pillows. We had a group just the other day drop off, I believe, 100 pillows. We've had people come and drop off quilts and blankets. We have people come to drop off food to ensure that the ladies have good meals. We've had people who have just been extreme in their generosity in response to the extreme need that we know is occurring in the county. And last, I wouldn't be a good CEO if I didn't encourage you to get connected with us. So there's our information for Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're active, very active in all three sites. So I would encourage you to take a chance and jot down this information, or as I understand this is being recorded, go back and take a look. Or to make it easy on yourself, you can just go to our website, iworksmc.org, and you can access our information there. So how are we doing on time? We're at 10:15. Do I have time to share a couple of these videos, Stephanie?
Absolutely. We have
Okay.
10:45. And
All right.
I forgot to mention at the top that if people have questions, feel free to put them in the chat or ask Courtney live after the videos.
Okay. So let me start with, so we just had our major fundraising event, which is our Interfaith Works Caring Breakfast. It was virtual this year, but as a way to prepare for that, we were able to put together 3 client stories, about 3 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes apiece. All of them were very impactful, and I think do a good job of showing the sort of impact that we have. Now, I will say that it's by happenstance that all 3 of these clients are immigrants. That is not necessarily representative of all of our clients, but these were the folks who were willing to share their stories with us, and we deeply appreciate their willingness to do so. So let's start.
Vine a este país con mis 3 hijos. Soy madre soltera de 3 niños, viuda de hecho.
She was very overwhelmed, very worried about being evicted. She said that she was alone here. She didn't have many, friends, family, and she didn't know what else to do. She was afraid. She needed a lot of assistance with different things. She needed food, she needed rent, she needed clothes.
Vengo acá cada viernes, aquí estoy sin falta, porque sí, me sirve para alimentar a mis hijos, es de muchísima ayuda y es bastante buena. Todo es de calidad y nutritiva.
Interfaith Works Connections is designed to serve our low-income Montgomery County residents. We connect them with different services throughout the county. And then we also have the Emergency Financial Assistance Program.
Me quedé sin trabajo en marzo. Entonces, mi vida económicamente ha cambiado bastante. Se ha vuelto bastante difícil. Mi reto ahora más grande es no poder pagar la renta. Si Interfaith no me hubiera ayudado, hubieran terminado el servicio de luz en mi casa. Si yo no hubiera recibido la asistencia para el pago de renta, lo más seguro es que yo estuviera en la calle con mis hijos.
The way I can tell when I've done something good, I guess, for a family is just the look of relief or the sound of relief in their voice.
Cada vez que yo recibo una llamada de este lugar, de Valerie, yo siento luego que es como un rayito de sol en medio de mi oscuridad.
Was everybody able to hear the sound on that okay?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay, very good. All right. We're very proud of the work that we've been able to do with Monica and her family. And I'll tell a little story to go with that. So in addition to the assistance we were able to find to help Monica through our Connections program, where we helped her to pay her rent, and through our food hub, where we helped her to be able to use her little income to do other things besides spending it on food. So we're able to help with that. We had a wonderful donor who I think actually describes the sort of selfless donation that we have many times from people in our community. So this lady called me up and said, this is, I think in October, she wanted to do something to help families. Wasn't really sure how she could be of most use, but we settled on her buying groceries for and buying gift cards for a family. She didn't want to be named. She didn't care about any recognition. She just wanted to help. And it was amazing to be able to see the impact that she had faithfully, religiously, really, to be able to bring groceries and provide gift cards every month from November through February, I believe, to be able to help a family she'd never met with circumstances that she was not necessarily familiar with herself, but she trusted us, and we're very grateful for that we were able to get the assistance to the people who needed it the most. That sort of selfless help is the kind of thing that I have come to know about the Interfaith Works community over the last 6 months. And I'm just so pleased to be able to do this work really in partnership with each of you. This next story here, Abdu, this is someone who was with one of our programs at Progress Place. And Progress Place is the hybrid shelter that I mentioned to you. We also have an empowerment center. So without any further ado, I'll let Abdu tell his own story. And please just stop me if for some reason you can't hear the sound.
Hello, my name is Abdullah from Guinea-Conakry, a country in West Africa.
Just a few weeks before we met him, he became very ill, was hospitalized, and after that hospitalization, learned that his wife was seeking a divorce. So in kind of an array of events led him to homelessness.
And at first it was a little strange and difficult because it was the first experience that I had being homeless. And all of a sudden the stereotype of being homeless just hits you so hard because as a society in whole, we have a tendency to think that only particular people are homeless without realizing their situation, or like our mind don't go there.
He came at the beginning of Overflow right before the pandemic hit.
When I got to Progress Place, I needed a good shower, hot one, and I needed a good hot meal, and somebody to talk to.
We know that following a trauma like this, there's a period in which peer support is tremendously impactful, and that is the first 30 to 60 days. We know that if you have that kind of support, you can overcome the trauma without long-term impact.
Progress Place allowed me to find myself again, get my confidence back, get me back, frame of mind, because all the resources that they made available to me was essential to me getting back on my feet.
He actually had many interviews before he finally got a job, and that speaks to the environment we were in at the time.
I worked at Giant store, and I'm the lead at the frozen section, which when you walk into Giant, anything that's frozen food, all the way to the ice cream, anything that's hard frozen, I'm the lead right here. Thank God Almighty.
He was able to move out of the shelter through a rapid rehousing program, where he was partnered with a roommate who was also in the shelter. And they will receive temporary assistance for approximately a year, and then they will be expected to be entirely self-sufficient after the year. There is very much a concern in the county and in the country that when the emergency orders are lifted and landlords can resume with evictions, et cetera, that we will see an uptick in homelessness. So we are listening and preparing ourselves, because we will have to be ready with an abundance of resources and support to these individuals who will be first-time homeless once this may occur.
And I didn't know if I was gonna make it alone. No matter how strong I was, thought that I was. But goes to tell you, you always need someone. The help that I received at this place, till the day I die, that's for sure, I will always be grateful.
Right. Abdu is probably one of my favorite clients to either chat with or hear about. He's been involved in our program with Interfaith Works for probably about 2 years. And it's amazing that he was able to overcome those obstacles, be able to get into a home of his own, which he shares with another person, to have sort of work that he's doing now. And the part of the story that he didn't mention is that at the height of the pandemic, so prior to the pandemic, he'd exited our shelter. He was in a place with a roommate. And then when the pandemic hit, he lost his job. And you can tell, hopefully from his demeanor and the way that he told his story, he's very proud of the work that he does, and very, very proud of the way that he was able to sort of get back on his feet. So he came back to our vocational services program and basically said, look, I am in dire need. I cannot lose all of this progress that I've made. Anyway, our vocational service counselors were able to work with him. We helped him to get another job very, very quickly. And he was able to avoid being evicted, losing the place, and all of the progress that he made. I think that just says a lot about the breadth of the work that we do at Interfaith Works. We help from the very beginning when people are the most vulnerable, and we work with them by building trust to help them to maintain the kind of work that they do, or the sort of progress that they've made. This last story, and then I'll pause for questions, is of Kokuvi, who just has a fantastic story, and rather than tell it and possibly ruin it by doing so, I will just play this video and let you hear.
My name is Kokuvi. I'm from Togo, West Africa, close to Ghana. We speak French over there, not English. I didn't have anywhere to sleep. I didn't have any job. The money I dropped with me was going to finish. So I asked at the church, Catholic church where I was participating in the Holy Mass, I need help. So they told me to come to Interfaith Way.
One of the first things that we do with clients is we get their work history and we prepare a resume so that we can start applying to jobs. He is now at National Children's Hospital.
One of my duties is to make sure that the room is clean, thoroughly clean for the next person we're going to occupy it. Thoroughly clean a room, the next person can get the COVID one. So that's why it's important that we have consciously complete a good job in a room. I started taking processing education online 2 days per week for 3 hours every day. The goal is to be capable to proceed instruments the surgeons are using in operating rooms. I need to get this certification to get a better job.
He is really driven. He's also facing incredible challenges because he, working and taking this class, they have tests and quizzes every single week. English is still challenging for him, and he's doing all this alone. He has no family here. We are, honestly, right now our program is overwhelmed. We have received an unprecedented number of referrals to our program. We currently have a wait list of 30 clients. When you take into account that, I would estimate at least 50% of the jobs that our clients would normally qualify for are no longer available, and it's highly unlikely that these jobs are going to come back. In terms of systemic problems, our program really is at the front line of the impact of COVID and all of the inequities in the system that impact people who have the least power.
That job I cannot get it if Interfaith Way didn't help me. I told my wife when she would come, I would let her come to say thank to people here. And I'm planning how I can help here people to be volunteer. What you Interfaith World gave me, I want to give back to other people. That is my plan. I don't like to call them homeless. I prefer people who need assistance.
All right. Well, thank you, each of you, for being present here today. I hope that you have learned a bit about the work that we do and the way that we're impacting people in Montgomery County, even in the midst of this very, very serious pandemic. I'd like to be able to take any of your questions. I'd also like to encourage you to, if you saw in any of those stories and any of the information that I had the privilege of sharing with you today, if you see any ways that you'd like to get connected, please do. I will put in the chat our website, I'll put my email address, and I would love to have you connected with us as well. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Courtney, I was just wondering, where exactly are the different volunteer locations located? I mean, not by street address, but it's like, is it Rockville? Is it?
Great, that's a great question. Most of the volunteer opportunities, so all of them obviously are in Montgomery County. Many of them are in Rockville. Our clothing center, for example, is in Rockville. The Women's Center is also in Rockville. The Progress Place, which you saw a couple of times featured there, that program is in Silver Spring.
Okay.
So generally, I'd say between Rockville, Twin Brook area, and Silver Spring are where most of our programs are located.
Just a curiosity question. Does Catholic Charities participate in your program or programs at all?
That is I'm really happy you asked that question. So one of the things we are looking forward to doing more is partnering with other organizations who are doing work so that we don't end up reduplicating services. I actually have a meeting scheduled next week with a lady who I understand is the volunteer coordinator for Catholic Charities. And I'll be connecting with her to talk about that very thing, how we can interact more.
Thank you very much. A second question, if I might. What are the tests that you apply? You talked for a while about the rental payments that your connections group make certain rental payments. It would seem to me that that would be a very complicated thing to do, to determine for whom you provide actual money for rent and who you do not provide it to. I wondered if you could just tell us what your basic means test is for those.
Sure. So there's definitely a means test, a threshold, an income threshold. That's the primary determinant there. So generally, if people qualify for Medicaid or they qualify for FARMS, which is free and reduced meals through the school system, or if they receive other public benefits, then they will also qualify for our program. So those are, we try to, I mentioned in the beginning that we do our very best not to exacerbate the crisis for people. So we're not going to ask you for a bunch of paperwork that end up overwhelming you, and then, you know, perhaps you decide not to come back for the help that you actually need. So we try to stick with the means test that folks are most familiar with. And generally, if they qualify for that, then they qualify for the assistance.
Courtney, how does it work? Do you pay the, like for the emergency assistance through the connections program for the utilities, for example, or for the rent? Does Interfaith Works pay the bill directly?
Yes, we pay either Pepco, Washington Gas, well, not generally WSSC, because typically for renters, that's included in their rent. But for utilities, we pay the utility company directly, and for rent, we pay the landlord directly.
What programs are you in greatest need of volunteers right now?
Would it seem like a fudge if I said all of them? We, I kid you not, the pandemic has really exacerbated the need. I'd say probably the two that I'm probably most concerned about are the rental assistance. That program And then I'd say the other would be the clothing center. Those are the two programs where we are really dependent on volunteers and donors. And if we don't get those, then the people who need to be served don't get served.
Yeah, Stephanie, I had a chance to volunteer at the food center, bagging food a couple of weeks ago. And if you look at the mounds of bags of clothes in that place that need to be sorted, I'm sure there's a ton of opportunity there to help out for sure. And it's very wide open. You feel very safe. And like you were saying, Courtney, before that. So I highly recommend jumping in there and do it. It was fun. Amazing.
Thank you for the endorsement, Vicki.
Yeah, it was great.
Good. I promise I didn't, Vicki and I do not have a prior arrangement. So I promise we didn't work this out.
I know, it's just kind of funny. A friend of ours, and Mary Margaret and I are in a women's club together, and she happened to be talking to a neighbor that was talking about how you guys started with maybe doing 100 bags a week, and then all of a sudden, now you're doing 600 bags a week. So it's pretty amazing.
At the clothing center, we clear about 400,000 pounds of donations every year. So to give you a size of an idea of the scope.
Yeah, that's very good. And parking is easy.
Yes.
And not bad.
And I was just wondering if you can bring youth, teens.
We get that question a lot. Here's what the director, so at the clothing center in the warehouse, no, just because of the safety risks of moving all of those donations, right? At the food hub, I have seen where we've had some closely supervised teenagers. And actually, I'll take that back. I'll walk that back just a little bit. At the clothing center, we have had some older teenagers, so like 16, 17, 18, closely supervised high school students who have needed the social service activity hours. So yes, with close supervision and obviously cleared prior by the director, who hopefully won't be too angry at me for saying that. But yes, we do allow.
I'm always looking for things. I would love to volunteer, but I'd also like to bring my kids along, not just for the SSL hours, but mostly just so they can see this.
Yeah.
Well,
no,
the day
really
I was there,
it's a different perspective. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The day I was there was one girl from Churchill, a senior, who was helping, and we were all being closely supervised.
Very good. Any other questions? I put the link to find out more about Interfaith Works in the chat, and also my email address is in there. I'm happy to take any other questions. Yes, Marcia? Oh, you're on mute.
Marcia, you need to unmute.
Thank you. Are the clothing boxes around the county operable where people can drop clothes into them?
So we're not connected with the clothing boxes that are placed around the county. I'm familiar with what you're talking about. We take donations directly at our site, which is off of Twin Brook Parkway. So we have a warehouse there, and people will come and drop donations there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I add one thing, Courtney, too? When you drop off the donations, there was a table right out, so you could just drive right up. You don't even have to walk in or anything, right? You just put it right on the table and you're all set.
That's correct. We will meet you at your car.
Yep.
Yeah, Donald delivered, we had a coat drive last fall for refugee families, but we had so much overflow above the families we were supporting that both Elsie Reed and me split up the amount to take, and my son took it. They had the bins right there. They just unload it straight into the bins that they roll in. It was very easy process.